Why do we call operant conditioning operant? Well, it's because the subject has to operate on the environment. If you're the subject, you have to do something to cause consequences. So it's consequences of your behavior. Conditioning, just classical conditioning, happens to you whether you really want it to or not. So, again, if I had a clicker and I gave the young man in the second row a fly swatter, and every time I hit a clicker, he is supposed to whack you upside the head, which I think is a good idea. You would, every time I started reaching for the clicker, start to cringe a little bit. And it wouldn't matter if you got smacked. After a while, just the clicking would get you going. Ooh. So there's no behavior on your part required for this to happen. In operant conditioning, the subject has to do something. This story starts back in the day with a guy named Thorndike, and I always suspect that there were no stray cats in his neighborhood because he was doing all this research in his basement, and there was nowhere to get lab animals in the day. So I imagine it was if your cat got loose, he would end up in Thorndike's basement doing puzzle boxes. But what he would do is he would build these boxes that were such that the cats really didn't like being in them, and they had to figure out how to get out of them. And this is a kind of a simple one. And you see what we have here is we have the door, we have this lever here, or this latch, and string goes through. And so you have food out here that the cat wants, and you have the cat inside kind of mad it can't get the food. Well, eventually the cat, not necessarily through any intelligence, but just through being a normal animal, will push down on this lever. And that's going to cause this to open. So the cat would learn, pushes the lever, it can get out and eat. You put the cat back in the box, it'll be a little bit faster the second time it hits the lever. Third time, a little bit faster. So what the cat is learning is that it's stepping on the pedal has the consequence of letting it get out and have food. Oops, shouldn't have done that. I need one of those undo buttons for life in general. Wouldn't that be great? So Thorndike comes up with what he calls the law of effect, and you will see this again, I'm sure. And the law of effect is also called his general theory of learning. And he comes up with this idea that would just eventually drive Skinner bonkers and Watson. He said that any behavior that leads to a satisfying state of affairs is likely to occur again. And any behavior that leads to an annoying state of affairs is less likely to occur again. Why did this drive Skinner nuts eventually? And Watson nuts? What in the world is a satisfying state of affairs? What in the world is an annoying state of affairs? Very imprecise language if you are in the behaviorist camp. But this is a big leap forward, and it's a general principle that really moves the field of learning forward. So Thorndike's law, I think you need to make sure you know that. Okay, some more terms. Punishment is a stimulus that follows a behavior that decreases the likelihood that a response will be repeated. And I'll tell you right now that the next 15 minutes we're going to be talking about words that people think they know the meaning of, and they don't when it comes to psychology, and it gets people in trouble. Please, please, please learn what we're talking about here and understand that they don't mean the same thing that they do in daily life. So a stimulus that follows a behavior that decreases the likelihood that a response will be repeated is punishment. Reinforcement, on the other hand, is a stimulus that follows a behavior that increases the likelihood that the response will be repeated. So far, so good. Now, this is where it gets hard for people. And if you make it through the next 5 minutes, understand what I'm talking about, and remember it, you're going to be in much better shape than if you didn't, or if you just left to do the freshman 50. Positive and negative in this context do not mean good or bad. They don't mean desirable or undesirable. Positive and negative simply refer to whether something is added or whether something is taken away. Negative reinforcement is not giving somebody a whipping. That is not negative reinforcement. Because first of all, negative is taking something away, not adding something, which a whipping would be. And reinforcement is making something more likely to happen instead of less likely to happen. So a spanking would be punishment, right? And would it be negative or positive? Positive punishment. Now that's a weird one to get your head around, isn't it? Positive punishment. But realize that that's what we're dealing with here. And if you don't understand the positive and negative, the punishment and the reinforcement, you're going to have a really hard time on the exams.